There's a huge difference between serving God out of habit and walking with Him for real. And maybe, deep down, you felt this before, that strange sense that your faith is working on the outside, but inside there's a void, a distance, a longing for something deeper. This video is for those who realize that religion isn't sustaining the heart and want to discover the intimacy God truly desires to have with them. Here you'll understand why God never called you to a mechanical spiritual routine, but to a living, real, and transforming relationship. We're going to talk about the signs that you might be stuck in religiosity without noticing, how that affects your life, and how to return to the place where your faith becomes a burning flame again, not an obligation. By the end of this video, you'll see how intimacy with God changes your choices, your peace, your emotional strength, and even the way you face your daily battles. So tell me, do you pray but feel like your words never get past the ceiling? Do you read the Bible but can't find direction? Do you go to church but still feel empty inside? Have you ever wondered why God seems distant even when you're doing everything right? If any of these questions echo inside you, stay with me, because today you may discover the difference between practicing religion and living in intimacy with the Creator. There are moments when a person looks at their spiritual walk and notices something quiet, yet profound. They're doing everything they were taught, praying, reading the Bible, going to church. But somehow, the heart is no longer following the movement of the hands. This is what happens when faith becomes a function, not a connection. And it's in moments like these that many realize there's a huge difference between maintaining religious practices and living a real relationship with God. Because practices keep you busy, but only intimacy transforms you. Jesus exposes this difference clearly in Matthew 15:8. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. He isn't condemning rituals or saying spiritual practices are useless. He is revealing the danger of a faith that functions on the outside but never reaches the inside. Before God asks for words, He looks at the distance between what you do and where your heart truly is. That distance determines whether there is religiosity or intimacy. A clear example of this appears in the life of Saul. He offered sacrifices, followed protocols, obeyed religious instructions, but he didn't know the heart of God. He confused activity with obedience, movement with relationship, and that confusion cost him dearly. Because when faith becomes a set of actions disconnected from the heart, a person loses discernment, loses sensitivity, and loses direction. Saul did a lot, but he didn't walk with God. Religious practice can keep you occupied, but not necessarily connected. It can organize your schedule, create discipline, and even give you the sense of, I'm doing my part. But a living relationship is something else entirely. It stirs the inner life. It confronts, warms, illuminates, corrects, and heals. It's not just something you do. It's something you live, breathe, feel, and recognize daily, like walking beside someone. Maybe you felt this before. You do everything right, yet see no change inside. You keep your spiritual commitments, but still carry the same anxiety, the same fears, the same emptiness. That's because practice touches behavior, while intimacy touches the soul. One changes the schedule, the other changes the life. And God has always started with the heart, not with activity. The question this video raises from the beginning is simple, yet deep. Does God have space in your day or in your inner life? Because you can make room in your routine and still be distant. Intimacy doesn't begin when you do something for God. It begins when you make space for Him inside you. That's why so many Christians feel tired, discouraged, and confused, while others with similar routines live full of peace, sensitivity, and direction. The difference is not in what they do, but in where they do it from. And here's the most important part. God never asked for performance. He never wanted a faith born from habit. He always called people to walk with Him, to feel His presence, to recognize His voice, to live in ongoing dialogue. It has always been about closeness. And this opens the door to something important, because there comes a moment when faith quietly stops being alive and starts functioning on autopilot, pulling the heart away from God without the person noticing. There are moments when someone realizes they're still doing everything they've always done, but the heart no longer responds the same way. Prayer still happens, but feels like repeating phrases that have lost their weight. Reading the Bible continues, but no longer brings confrontation or direction. Worship comes out of the lips, but no longer moves the inner life. It's like living a spiritual routine where everything works, except the flame that used to give meaning to everything. Jesus describes this exact movement when he speaks to the church in Ephesus in Revelation 2:4. "Yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first." They still served, worked, defended the faith, persevered. Externally, they looked firm, but the deep motivation, love, surrender, passion, had been lost. It's possible to do things for God while the heart is far from Him. And without noticing, the affection that sustains faith gets replaced by mere habit. The scene with Martha and Mary shows this contrast vividly. Martha served Jesus with dedication, yet was inwardly restless, overwhelmed, exhausted. Mary chose simply to be with him, to listen, rest, and still her heart. It wasn't a battle between right and wrong, but between movement and nearness, between intense activity and spiritual sensitivity. Martha did a lot, but didn't realize that right in front of her stood someone who desired her heart more than her service. The danger of mechanical faith is that it settles in slowly, almost imperceptibly. A person doesn't choose to live on autopilot. They just lose sensitivity without noticing. Prayer that once was alive becomes obligation. Bible study that once stirred the heart becomes part of the schedule. Worship that once was surrender becomes a routine task. And when that happens, the soul notices before the mind understands. Something is missing. Life is missing. The heart begins to drift from God when a person keeps doing but stops feeling, stops opening up, stops listening, stops surrendering. And over time, the feeling arises that God is far away, not because He moved, but because the heart slipped into automatic mode. God doesn't compete with hurry, with excess, with an overloaded heart. He doesn't shout to get attention. He waits to be sought with sincerity. The question that reveals this phase is not, am I active in the faith, but am I truly present in it? Because it's possible to kneel without bending the heart, possible to open the Bible without opening the soul, possible to sing without surrendering. And when this becomes the pattern, the inner life grows tired, heavy, and confused, like someone who keeps walking but forgot why they started. And often, people try to fix this by doing even more, reading more, praying more, serving more. But what's missing is not quantity, it's depth, not effort, but surrender, not movement, but presence. And when that awareness awakens, something inside begins to open again to what God truly desires, not empty practices, but a living, sincere, awakened heart. One of the most liberating revelations in the spiritual life is realizing that God never asked you to prove anything. He never demanded perfection before closeness, nor strength before sincerity. What He has always sought is truth, the willingness to come before Him without masks, without rehearsed speeches, without trying to look more spiritual than you really are. Intimacy begins where pretense ends. This is what Jesus reveals in His conversation with the Samaritan woman when He declares in John 4:24, God is spirit, and His worshippers must worship Him in spirit and in truth. He's not talking about rituals, places, or traditions. He's talking about truth, the ability to recognize who you are and who God is without hiding your fragility. Jesus cuts through her religious layers and touches the part of her life she least wanted to expose. Not to condemn her, but to set her free. David is a clear example of this reality. He isn't remembered for perfection, but for transparency before God. He confessed, he wept, he poured himself out, he acknowledged his failures, he asked for guidance. He didn't build a spiritual image, he offered his heart with all its cracks. That's why God said, "This is a man after my own heart." Not because he never fell, but because he never stopped opening himself. Religiosity, on the other hand, tries to hide. It tries to show strength where there is exhaustion, faith where there is doubt, stability where there is fragility. It's like painting the facade of a house while the foundations are worn down. The outside looks good, but inside there is no life, and the person starts carrying a weight God never asked them to carry. The weight of looking strong, the weight of sustaining a spirituality that doesn't match what they feel inside. But God doesn't work with facades. He doesn't heal what you pretend doesn't exist. He doesn't restore what you hide. Intimacy begins when you say, "Lord, this is what I have today. It's not much, it's not pretty, but it's true." That honesty, which seems small, opens doors that years of empty discipline never open, because God draws near to those who offer truth, not performance. And when that truth begins to blossom, something changes inside you. Prayer becomes a real conversation. The Bible begins to speak in precisely the way you needed. The presence of God stops being a concept and becomes an experience. It's like stepping out of a dark room and letting the light reveal what was hidden. Religiosity keeps the soul in shadows. Sincerity opens the windows for God to enter. But before this truth can transform your walk, it needs to reveal something many people don't notice: silent signs that religiosity is infiltrating the heart. Signs that show when appearance is taking the place of intimacy, when exhaustion is replacing sensitivity, when image is substituting surrender. There are moments in the spiritual life when someone does everything right, yet feels inside that something is off. They keep commitments, maintain habits, participate in everything they always have. But internally, they feel a weariness that doesn't match the faith they project. This is one of the first signs that religiosity may be occupying a space that should belong to intimacy. The outside keeps functioning, but the inside is slowly drying up. The Bible makes this distinction clear in 1 Samuel 16:7, when God says to Samuel, "The Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." This verse reveals not only how God sees, but where he sees. He looks beyond behavior, beyond routine, beyond image. He seeks the truth of the heart, and it is precisely in that place that religiosity tries to hide. One of the most common signs is doing a lot for God, but realizing you don't truly know him. A person prays but doesn't feel a response, reads but receives no direction, worships but doesn't perceive his presence. It's like someone who talks about God all the time but hasn't talked to him in weeks. It's an active faith on the surface, but disconnected at the core. Another sign is living to maintain a Christian image. A person becomes more concerned with what others see than with what God sees. They avoid looking weak, avoid exposing struggles, avoid admitting that the fire is gone, and without noticing, they begin building a version of themselves that doesn't match the real condition of the heart. That creates constant weight, because appearance demands effort, while intimacy demands surrender. Religiosity also creates fear. Fear of failing, fear of not being accepted, fear of disappointing God, fear of not doing enough. This fear doesn't come from God. It comes from a heart enslaved by performance. Intimacy produces peace. Religiosity produces spiritual anxiety. The soul becomes tense, trying to prove itself, trying to look strong, trying to meet expectations God never set. Another sign is the loss of spiritual joy. Everything becomes heavy. Everything becomes obligation. Everything feels tiring. A person keeps doing, but doesn't feel life in anything. It's like carrying a bucket with holes. No matter how much water you put in, it never fills. Religiosity steals the joy of being with God because it turns relationship into a checklist. And there's one more silent but dangerous sign: comparison. A person starts measuring their faith by the faith of others, starts feeling inferior when they see someone more firm, starts blaming themselves for not having the same intensity. This is not the fruit of intimacy. It's the fruit of inner emptiness. When the heart is far from God, it seeks external references to validate something that can only be received internally. If any of this is echoing inside you, take a deep breath. This is not condemnation, it's revelation. These are signs that your heart is asking for closeness, not more activity. God is not exposing you. He is calling you. And if this message is speaking to you right now, let this settle inside you. Intimacy is calling your name. If this is describing something you've been living through, stay with us. God may use this exact moment to reignite something inside you. There are few pains as unsettling as this. You pray, you read, you seek, you try to be faithful, but you feel as if God is far away. It feels like talking to heaven and hearing nothing back, like doing everything you were taught and still not noticing any movement inside you. It's like walking with a map in your hands, following every instruction and still not finding the way. That distance hurts, confuses, and makes a person ask, "What is happening to me?" The truth is that God never withdraws, but He doesn't respond to routine. He responds to the heart. That's what He reveals in Jeremiah 29:13. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. It's not about strength or volume or quantity. It's about depth. God is not looking for a tired heart trying to hit spiritual goals. He's looking for a surrendered, open, sincere heart, a heart that seeks Him, not out of obligation, but out of love, dependence, and truth. One example of this is the rich young ruler. He kept the commandments, knew the law, and lived an exemplary religious life. But when Jesus called him into something deeper, he became sad and walked away. He did everything right, but his heart wasn't surrendered. He was seeking God through behavior, not through surrender. And that's why he lacked the life that only intimacy can give. Many times when God seems distant, it's not punishment, it's an invitation. The spiritual routine may be active, but the heart might be closed, tense, rushed, or full of wrong expectations. A person prays expecting a specific kind of answer, reads wanting to feel something instantly, seeks God but still wants to stay in control. But intimacy works at another pace. It is born in stillness, in openness, in the kind of sincerity that doesn't try to manipulate God, only longs to find Him. And it's common for this apparent distance to produce frustration. A person thinks, "I'm doing everything right. Why don't I feel anything?" That pain is real, but it's also revealing, because many times the problem is not in the effort, it's in the motivation. It's that seeking God has turned into an attempt to fix something instead of an attempt to be with Him. When faith becomes a transaction, His presence becomes rare. But the good news is that God uses this feeling of distance to lead us back to the heart. When nothing works, He is teaching us to seek Him for who He is, not just for what He can do. When the routine no longer sustains you, He is calling you into depth. It's as if He was saying, "I don't want you to just follow me. I want you to know me." And when that awareness starts to grow, everything changes. Prayer becomes more honest, the Bible gains a new light, the soul begins to rest, and you realize the distance was never truly real. It was just your heart learning to leave autopilot and return to the place of surrender. Because intimacy with God has always been available, but it is only perceived by those who seek Him with all their heart, not just with all their effort. We're going to go deeper into this journey because understanding God's desire for intimacy from Eden onward completely changes how you see your walk with Him. When we look at the Bible as a whole, something becomes very clear. God never began the story with religion. He began with relationship. Before there was a temple, a law, a system, rituals or structures, there was a garden. And in that garden, a God who walked with human beings in the cool of the day. The first image of faith is not a service. It's a walk. It's not a command. It's a conversation. It's not a liturgy. It's closeness. This desire appears in Deuteronomy 6:4-5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. It doesn't say serve, impress, perform. It says love. That is surrender. That is a whole heart. God didn't ask for a life full of religious activities. He asked for love, because love keeps the heart alive, awake, and sensitive. Love sustains what routine can't sustain. In Eden, the original plan was simple and profound. God would walk with human beings daily. There was no distance, no distrust, no noise, only presence. But when sin entered, the first thing that broke was not the physical world. It was the relationship. Man hid. Intimacy was broken. The heart closed. And from that day on, God has been calling humanity back. The whole biblical story echoes this call. Moses wasn't chosen because of his ability, but because God knew him face to face. Abraham wasn't called because of formality, but because he walked with God in trust. Hannah poured out her soul before God, not her performance. Jeremiah heard God as someone who speaks to the heart. Daniel kept intimacy even in a foreign land. The entire Bible is an invitation. Come back close. And when Jesus comes into the world, he restores exactly what was lost in Eden, the possibility of walking with God again. He didn't come to start a new religion. He came to open a way of relationship, deep, personal, intimate. He called disciples to be with him before being sent by him. The calling begins in his presence, not in performance. Intimacy has always been God's intention, not as an isolated moment in your day, but as a way of life. Intimacy is noticing God in ordinary routines, in your breathing, in your awareness, in your thoughts, in your steps. It's living with the awareness that he is near, that he speaks, that he guides, that he cares. It's returning to the atmosphere of Eden, not physically, but spiritually. It's living again what was designed from the beginning. When this perspective shifts, something realigns inside you. You realize intimacy is not the privilege of a few, nor something mystical and distant. It's the original plan. It's what God has always wanted. It's what he is calling you to live now. And when that closeness becomes real, it becomes impossible to live on practices alone, because your heart starts longing for an entire life with God, not just isolated spiritual moments. And it's exactly this intimacy that starts creating practical differences in daily life. Differences that are not external first, but internal. Differences that transform attitudes, decisions, and emotions. Differences that make it very clear who is living religion and who is living relationship. Over time, intimacy with God begins to produce something no isolated practice can generate: visible transformation in daily life. It's not mystical and it's not overly emotional. It's simple, quiet, and deep. While religiosity focuses on doing, intimacy begins to change the being. And it's especially in everyday moments, in decisions, emotions, and reactions, that the differences become most evident. The prophet Hosea describes this journey in Hosea 6:3. Let us know the Lord. Let us press on to know him. As surely as the dawn, he will appear. Notice, it's not an invitation to complete tasks, but to know him. And knowing implies relationship, closeness, and daily nearness. Those who walk in intimacy understand that God is not looking for performance. He is looking for a present heart. Religion creates pressure. Intimacy creates stability. Religion drains. Intimacy restores. The practical difference first appears in motivations. Those who live by religion complete tasks to avoid guilt, to feel up to date, to keep an image. They act out of fear of failing, but those who live intimacy seek God out of desire, love, and real dependence. They fear losing the connection, not their reputation. They don't act to look spiritual. They act because they've found life in His presence. Another difference arises in decision-making. Religiosity reacts to circumstances. Intimacy responds to the voice of God. One lives by impulse, tension, and comparison. The other lives by discernment. Moses is a clear example of this. He wouldn't take a single step without the presence of God. He said, "If your presence does not go with me, do not send me up from here." His life was not guided by practice, but by nearness. And that changes everything. You also see differences in emotions. Religion produces anxiety. Am I doing this right? Is God pleased? Am I enough? Intimacy produces peace, a peace that exists before any answer, a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a peace born from the simple truth: I am with Him, and He is with me. Udum. It's a security that doesn't come from effort, but from presence. Another visible aspect is how a person relates to others. Those who live religion tend to be more rigid, more critical, more concerned with appearances. Those who live intimacy carry gentleness, patience, and sensitivity. The presence of God softens the heart. It breaks silent pride, heals impulsive reactions, and restores the capacity to love deeply. And there is one more essential difference. Intimacy produces ongoing transformation. It doesn't create emotional highs or isolated moments. It shapes character. It refines the conscience. It aligns priorities. Religion tries to adjust external behavior. Intimacy begins within and naturally flows outward. It's like a tree that grows from the inside out, deep roots before visible fruit. When you observe these differences, it becomes almost impossible to confuse religiosity with relationship. Faith stops being a mechanical routine and becomes spiritual breath. The soul stops merely surviving and begins to live. And this inner transformation reveals another important truth. There are silent obstacles that try to hinder intimacy. Internal noises that block God's voice and distance the heart, even when the intention is good. Even when the heart longs for intimacy, there are silent barriers that try to block this closeness. They are not obvious barriers like lack of faith or rebellion. They are internal noises, distractions, pressures, and habits that accumulate without being noticed. And when these noises gain strength, the soul begins to lose sensitivity. A person keeps seeking but can't hear, keeps walking but can't feel direction, and this creates spiritual frustration. James describes an essential principle in James 4:8. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. This reveals something powerful and confrontational. A part of intimacy depends on our internal posture. God is near. He always has been. But the heart only perceives Him when it draws near with truth, stillness, and surrender. And internal noise tries to suffocate exactly that. The first obstacle is hurry. A person tries to fit God between tasks, prays quickly, reads quickly, tries to consume the Bible the same way they consume information. But intimacy doesn't grow at high speed. It grows at the pace of the heart. Hurry suffocates sensitivity, steals depth, and turns the secret place into a race. The soul may seek, but doesn't have time to hear. Another obstacle is guilt. Many people approach God carrying a constant sense of unworthiness. They think they need to improve before coming close, feel less weak, be more stable. But guilt paralyzes. It traps the person in a spirituality based on deserving. And intimacy is not born from deserving. It is born from grace. Exhaustion is also a silent enemy, not just physical tiredness, but emotional exhaustion. A mind overloaded, a heart worn out, a soul saturated with worries. In this state, a person tries to pray but can't focus, tries to read but can't absorb, tries to seek but feels nothing. It's not lack of faith, and it's lack of inner rest. Intimacy needs space, and exhaustion fills everything. There is also the excess of activity. A person believes they must do more for God, serve more, produce more, get involved in more. But when the hands are too full, the heart becomes too empty. Excess steals the quietness necessary to hear God. It fills the outside so much that there is no room left for Him to fill the inside. Another obstacle is praying out of obligation. A person feels they must fulfill a time requirement, maintain a rigid routine, follow a certain structure. That creates mechanical spirituality, where the spirit barely participates and the soul participates even less. Prayer becomes a burden, not an encounter. It becomes a task, not a conversation. Intimacy doesn't live under pressure. It lives in the atmosphere of truth. Breaking these obstacles begins with a simple but profound decision, opening your heart before God, no matter the pace, the condition, or the internal mess. Intimacy is born when you allow yourself to be honest. When you create small moments of quiet, when you let God speak in the middle of the chaos, when you exchange obligation for sincerity and performance for surrender. And when these barriers begin to fall, something changes inside you. Sensitivity returns. God's voice becomes clear again. The soul breathes. Faith comes back to life. And you discover that intimacy doesn't depend on strength. It depends on openness. And that openness prepares the heart for something practical and essential, developing habits and attitudes that sustain a real relationship with God, not just religious activity. If this is speaking to you, write one word in the comments that describes this moment, just one word. When the heart begins to awaken to intimacy, an inevitable question rises. Where do I start practically? Because it's not enough to feel the call, you must learn to live in a way that cultivates closeness daily. Intimacy is not born from big spiritual events. It is born from small, consistent choices made with sincerity. Simple steps, yet profound ones, that transform faith from the inside out. Jesus describes this process in John 15:4. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. Remaining is not running. It's not exhausting yourself. It's not trying to impress. Remaining is being, staying, dwelling. It is building a life where God is not squeezed into the schedule. He is the center. The first practical step toward cultivating intimacy is turning prayer into real conversation. It doesn't need to be long, perfect, or poetic. It needs to be true, speaking to God as someone who is present, someone who cares, someone who understands you better than you understand yourself. Prayer stops being obligation and becomes the most honest place in your soul. Another essential step is reading the Bible, seeking God's voice, not just information. When you open Scripture expecting to be confronted, guided, and transformed, something shifts. The Bible stops being just a book and becomes nourishment. It speaks into specific moments, illuminates hidden areas, calms inner storms. That kind of reading creates spiritual roots, and deep roots sustain any season. Creating moments of silence is also essential. Not just external silence, but internal silence. Turning down noise, reducing distractions, letting the mind breathe. The presence of God often reveals itself in a whisper, not in noise. A hurried heart does not hear. A quiet heart recognizes. Even a few minutes of stillness each day can reawaken spiritual sensitivity that was asleep. Another transformative step is practicing intentional gratitude. Gratitude realigns the heart with God's character. It shifts the focus from what is lacking to what He has already done. Gratitude opens space for His presence to be perceived even in routine moments. It heals anxiety, weakens comparison, and restores a sense of purpose. And then there is a point that changes everything: learning to discern God's presence in ordinary life. Not waiting for big moments, emotional services, or extraordinary events, but noticing Him in conversations, on the path, at work, at rest, in thoughts, in small details. Intimacy grows when you realize God is present in the everyday. Finally, the principle of remaining becomes a lifestyle. Remaining means turning your heart toward God many times throughout the day. Remaining means remembering you're not alone. Remaining means responding to the Spirit's touch with sensitivity. Remaining means keeping your heart open. Intimacy is not an isolated practice. It is a continuous flow of presence and response. And when these steps become part of your life, transformation stops being a desire and becomes a reality. The soul gains strength, the mind finds peace, emotions stabilize, decisions become clearer, because intimacy with God doesn't just change moments, it changes entire paths. And this inner transformation prepares you to understand how intimacy directly impacts your battles, choices, and emotions. When intimacy with God becomes part of your daily life, you begin to notice a change that doesn't depend on circumstances. It depends on what's happening inside. The battles still exist, but they no longer carry the same weight. Anxiety still tries to show up, but it no longer dominates. Confusion still appears, but it no longer disorients you the way it once did. It's as if the presence of God reorganizes the heart from within. Isaiah describes this change in Isaiah 40:31. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and not faint. Strength doesn't come from effort. It comes from closeness. Renewal happens when the heart learns to rely on God, not only on itself. In battles, intimacy brings direction. The person who once reacted with fear now learns to discern. They don't face everything alone anymore. They face it accompanied. And that changes posture, attitude, rhythm. The presence of God brings a clarity that protects against impulses and desperate decisions. In choices, intimacy creates sensitivity. Instead of acting by logic or pressure, the person learns to recognize God's peace. They can sense when something is misaligned, even if it looks right on the outside. God's presence becomes a filter, simple but powerful. In emotions, intimacy brings stability, not because it removes feelings, but because it anchors the heart in something greater than circumstances. The soul learns to rest even without understanding everything, learns to trust even without seeing, learns to wait even without feeling immediately. This changes the internal climate of a person, and deep down, the greatest transformation happens in identity. The closer you are to God, the less you need to prove anything, to compare yourself, or to seek approval. His presence heals silent insecurities and gives the heart a safe place to exist. When this transformation happens, you realize intimacy is not a spiritual accessory. It is the axis that sustains everything. Decisions, emotions, relationships, purpose. Nothing remains the same when God stops being a habit and becomes a real presence. When you look at everything we've talked about here, one truth stands out with strength. God never called you to function. He called you to walk. He never asked you to maintain a perfect routine. He asked for your heart. He never wanted you to live trying to look strong. He always wanted to be your strength. The difference between religion and intimacy is exactly this. One depends on effort. The other is born from surrender. And maybe, as you listen to this message, something inside you began to move. Maybe you saw yourself in that silent exhaustion, in that prayer that no longer flows, in that Bible that doesn't speak the way it once did, in that emptiness that keeps showing up even when you do everything right. Maybe you realized it's not God who has been distant. It's your heart that slipped into autopilot, trying to survive through gestures when what God wants is encounter. The question that remains is simple, yet deep. What is keeping you from returning to this place of intimacy? And an even more direct one, what changes in your life when you decide to walk with God for real, not just function for Him? Think about that for a moment. Because the answer to those questions might be the beginning of a real spiritual transformation. Now, imagine the hand of Christ resting on your shoulder, not demanding, not judging, not expecting performance, but calling you back. Imagine His light touching the places inside you where you felt weight, confusion, or coldness. Imagine this light reigniting what has faded, aligning what was scattered, healing what you couldn't even explain. That's what intimacy does. It doesn't just change behavior, it changes internal atmospheres. If this video spoke to you, don't let it fade here. Subscribe so you can continue receiving content that revives your soul and strengthens your walk. And if you want to go even deeper, keep watching the recommended videos here on the channel. Each one can become another piece in this process of spiritual restoration. Christ is calling you closer, not to performance, but to presence, not to a faith of appearances, but to a living, real, and transforming relationship. Come back close. He is here.